Jonah during the sermon. So, do you know anything about the story of Jonah? Yes. Jonah was a prophet that God told to preach, and he said no, and he ran from him. And when he got on the ship, a big storm came, and they threw him overboard, and a big fish swallowed him up, took him to the land, and then spit him back out. And then God said again, go and preach. And Jonah said, okay. So our lesson, we're going to be learning a lot of lessons. But one of the lessons is when God tells you to do something, and he really wants you to do it, what do you think you should do? Do it. Exactly. We're going to be hearing a lot of good stuff about Jonah today. So, all right. That is about it. Thank you very much. And not to single our, if there's children, if they want anything to color or anything like that, any kind of things like that, there's a back have that. So you're very welcome. Today, like I said, we're going to be going to the book of Jonah. We're going to be taking a little break from all the very intense stories that we've been going over, just because it's good to take a break sometimes from all of that. But we're going to be reading through the book of Jonah if you want to turn there. It's a very short book, but it's also a very good book that we can learn a lot of lessons from and apply a lot of it to our lives today. So we are going to start from the book of the first chapter in Jonah. It says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. And after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Now, Nineveh was not a Jewish city. It was actually the capital of Assyria, and which was right next to Israel. And if you're, like I said to the kids, if you're sure that God is calling you to do something, then you should probably do it. But here we see Jonah running the opposite way across Israel. And there are some times that God might tell you to do something, you don't do it, and he'll pass you by and give it to somebody else. I've had that happen before to where, I felt God wanted me to do something, and then I hesitate and somebody else does it, and I miss the blessing. But sometimes, when God calls you to do something, you may have an experience like Jonah had. Now, I might have said it here before, but I heard a teaching one time that was very good, that God will speak to you in one of two ways. Either he will whisper in a still small voice, or he will hit you over the head with a brick. Learn to listen for the voice, because the brick hurts. So, here, as we continue reading, is Jonah's brick. So it continues in verse 4. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Like Jonah, if we ignore the call of God, sometimes we will miss what's happening in our world around us. Mainly the people who are in need, much like the sailors who are in need of help. There's a lot of people that were like the sailors that were in a storm of life. And as we continue to read in verse 6, the captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish." So as you see, the captain and the sailors are desperate for answers. And like them, sometimes people are searching for answers to life, and they're searching in the wrong ways, in relationships, and maybe addictions and drugs and things of that nature. They're looking for a way out. They're looking for answers to how they handle the storms of life. And my question today, that we can modernize this, are we like Jonah? Are we sleeping? Are we doing anything to help them? Some people are doing anything they can to survive, like the sailors are throwing things overboard and crying after their gods. Jonah had the answer to their problem, and yet he was asleep. I used to think that showing people ways out of storms of their lives and helping people out had more to do with holiness and pure life and setting an example. But people want to see more than that from us. They do want to see us living as Christians without being hypocritical, but they also want to see more to us. And we're going to see this in the later verses. As we continue in verse 7, then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." And they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country, and what people are you?" And he answered, "I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." And this terrified them. They asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. And the sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" Now at this time, Israel was already established. They were already an established nation, so the odds are the sailors already knew about the God of the Hebrews. They knew he was no one to be messed with. And they were terrified, not just because of who Jonah served. They were also knew he was running from God, and God was coming after him. So just as the sailors asked Jonah, what should they do? Sometimes when people know that we are Christians, they will ask us for advice. Well, how do you deal with problems? How do you get through your hard times? How do you deal with life's storms? And we can give them advice, but there's something much more powerful that we can do. We can show by our actions and our compassion that we care about them. In verse 12, it picks up, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that the great storm has come upon me." But instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried to the Lord, "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you have pleased." And then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Sometimes we can give people advice, but like the sailors, they just kept trying to do it their own way. Jonah said, "Throw me overboard." The sailors said, No, we're going to keep doing this. We don't want this blood on our hands." And there's, when you go to support groups like AA, there's a principle that you have to get to the point where you realize you're helpless. And like these sailors, people might say, "Well, I'm going to quit this addiction on my own, strength." And you just keep rowing and rowing and rowing, and we're not getting anywhere. And it's not until you finally just give up and say, "I can't do this, and it's out of my control." And that's the point that the sailors had to get to. They could not do anything to calm the storm on their own. And these verses also are a foreshadowing of Jesus. And I'm going to go very quickly through these points. When you read these verses, you see something happening. Jesus actually referred to the story of Jonah several times. And when you see that how it connects to this, we as a human race were like the sailors trying to get to heaven on our own righteousness, following the law. We weren't getting anywhere. So like Jonah, Jesus said, I have to be sacrificed. And once that happened, our relationship, like the sea calmed, our relationship with God was restored again. And Jesus also referred many times to his burial, to the same thing as Jonah. Jonah was inside the whale for 3 days, as Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days. So there's a lot of parallels and a lot of foreshadowing of the Old Testament to the New. And we can also see that when people see the compassion of Jesus, when they realize as Christians that we truly care, that we're doing more than just quoting scriptures at them, that's when hearts and lives are changed. It was when Jonah actually made that sacrifice. They threw him in the sea, and they're up there having a worship service. But that's when lives are really changed. We're not going to go over chapter 2 in a beautiful prayer, but we're going to skip over that for the sake of time. We actually said a few verses in our call of worship. But basically, at this point, when Jonah is praying inside of the belly of the fish, he's basically saying, "Okay, God, you got me. I give up." So when we continue to read chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you." So Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now Nineveh was a very important city. A visit required 3 days. On the first day, Jonah started into the city. He proclaimed 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overturned. And the Ninevites believed God and declared a fast. And all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Then he issued a proclamation in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let any man or beast, herd or flock taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent, and with compassion turn from his fierce anger, so that we will not perish. And when God saw that they did what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. It is an amazing feat that this happened, because Nineveh was known for being a ruthless and bloodthirsty place. And yet, they turned from their ways when they heard that God was coming for them. And his wrath was upon them. They turned completely around. The whole city. Even the king humbled himself. But they knew, as the sailors did, that the God of the Hebrews and his judgment was sure. In chapter 4 it says, "But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, 'O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live.'" This is such a ridiculous response from Jonah. I mean, can you imagine that? It's like someone coming to me and saying, this person over here said they're a Christian and they need a little bit of help with some gas money. And oh, yeah, sure. And it's like that person saying, "See, I knew you would do that. You Christian, you're so goody-goody. I can't believe you." Jonah is complaining to God for saving these people. Now, understand, Jonah and the Israelites thought negatively about the Ninevites, but still, he's saying, "It is better for me to die. I can't believe you did this. You saved this whole nation of people that did not deserve it." So, as we finish up in Jonah, this is where the big message hits. But the Lord replied in verse 4, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. And there he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. He's still not giving up. He still believes something's going to happen. Then the Lord provided a vine. He made it grow up over Jonah to give him shade for his head, to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was very happy about the vine. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the vine so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die and said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you have a right to be angry about the vine?" "I do," he said. "I am angry enough to die." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell the right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" So we all know a lot about the story of Jonah and the whale and prophesying, but this is really the thrust of the whole book at the end. God is trying to illustrate to Jonah through this vine that Jonah was more concerned about the welfare of the vine than he was for Nineveh. God was telling him, I made this vine grow up and I destroyed it. And if you're more concerned about that, I made the Ninevites. I created them. But you want me to destroy them without even giving them a chance. Why? Because the vine was something that benefited Jonah. So he cared about that. But the Ninevites he had no use for. God was saying, in essence, Jonah, it's not all about you. He was saying, who are you to pronounce my judgment on someone that I created? Have you ever caught yourself thinking this way about people? I know, I'll admit that I have. I've had, maybe not to this extreme, but I've had people who have hurt me that I felt deserved judgment. But who are we to judge who deserves God's mercy and who doesn't? God says over and over again in the Bible, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. It's up to me, not you. You know, some people today have a hard time with, and I've had a hard time with this as well, people who are death row in prisons and go through a conversion to Christianity. People have a hard time with that and think maybe they don't deserve it. And people have a hard time with Paul even, who wrote most of the New Testament. Paul didn't, some people say Paul didn't deserve mercy. He was terrible. He was a horrible man. And I'm sure people at the time Paul was alive had a hard time with it. I mean, he was persecuting the church, and here comes this conversion. And I'm sure people were asking, God, are you sure about this one? I'm sure they didn't think he deserved mercy. But we need to be so careful about this as Christians. We are so quick to dole out God's judgment on people. But the truth of the matter is, it's not about us. It's not our call. Jonah's mistake was he thought God's mercy was something that we deserved. But that's what is so amazing about it. Through Jesus, God showed us that none of us is worthy of his grace and mercy. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. If God chooses to show mercy to someone, no matter what their relationship is to us, how we see them, then we need to rejoice for them. Would you pray with me, please? Merciful and loving God, we come before you today thanking you that you showed grace on us, Lord. We know that none of us is worthy. We know that none of us is perfect. But we know that your love for us overshadows all of that. And just as Jonah sacrificed himself, that, Lord Jesus, you sacrificed yourself on our behalf, and we thank you. And we pray that you would help us to go out, and as we see the world before us, as we see people living in different ways, and ways that we might not agree with, and Father, we pray that you would help us to show your mercy, to whoever you show mercy on, and not question me about that.